Ford says about Teddy, perhaps it's time that you had a worthy story of origin. You see, there are those who have a created story of origin. Like there's groups of people that have been created through ethnocide, people that have been replaced through paper genocide that we may never completely know about until it is time for us to know them. You ever notice that there's always a means? It seems like there's always surges of information every few years leading towards specific things amongst your strongest thought leaders, those who are the most known for their influence in thinking and analyzing their society and society around them. And that's what I was saying in terms of looking at the book People of the Secret. And there's been a means of stealing and replacing identities in today's time. Ford said perhaps it's time you had a story of worthy origin. And a small part of my new narrative, a fiction which, like all great stories, is rooted in truth. All great stories of fiction have some form of truth in them. The great ones is what he's saying. You see, we are a part of a new world. The old world, the world of antiquity, is gone. We're living in the new world under a new narrative which is rooted in truth. Ford has he got some cold monologues throughout this season because he's only in season 1. So a lot of things that he said early in season 1 is very paramount later on, considering how things play out. But you probably really only catch it when you go back and watch it. Westworld is one of them shows you have to watch it more than one time. So don't feel bad if you don't see a lot of this stuff initially, because you really got to go back and kind of catch it. It's just one of those things. Now we get this introduction of this character named Wyatt. This is supposed to be a villain, right? And there's this update to Teddy now that allows him to remember this Wyatt character. Ford is changing all of the hosts. He's giving them updates that's aligning with this new storyline that he has in place. Now Teddy attempts to there's the moment where Teddy is attempting to teach Dolores how to shoot, but she can't pull the trigger. It's not a coincidence she can't pull the trigger, because she's not supposed to be able to pull the trigger. She's not programmed to pull the trigger. She's not supposed to be able to hurt anybody. That's not who she is. And Teddy says some hands aren't made to pull a trigger. That's what he meant. Some hands aren't made to pull a trigger. Some people aren't made to do some things because they don't have it in them to do. It's not in them to do. It's not in their character. It's not a part of their being, so you can't expect them to do these things. And so when we hear Ford explain to Bernard what Arnold's process was for creating consciousness,
he wasn't interested in the appearance of intellect, of wit. He wanted the real thing. He wanted to create consciousness. He imagined it as a pyramid. Memory, improvisation, self-interest.
And at the top?
Never got there. But he had a notion of what it might be. He based it on a theory of consciousness called the bicameral mind.
The idea that primitive man believed his thoughts to be the voice of the gods. I thought it was debunked.
No, it's a theory for understanding the human mind, perhaps, but not as a blueprint for building an artificial one. You see, Arnold built a version of their cognition in which the hosts heard their programming as an inner monologue, with the hopes that in time their own voice would take over. It was a way to bootstrap consciousness.
The hosts hearing their inner monologue, programming, and in hopes of their own voice taking over, leading to therefore consciousness. But it was like on one hand, some would hear that voice. They would either hear that voice as God, but there would therefore be lunatics.
But Arnold hadn't considered two things. One, that in this place, the last thing you want the hosts to be is conscious. And two, the other group who considered their thoughts to be the voices of the gods.
Lunatics.
Indeed.
You see, people are either conscious or crazy or delusional when you understand the nature of when you perceive the nature of your reality different than the masses. These are all outliers of society. Your those in institutions, which would be your prisons and your mental hospitals, stuff like that. And there would be those who want to be off the grid, those who are wanting to or understanding things about society in a different way, but just not to an extreme level that they can't function within society. You know what I'm saying? It would be like, if you seen, it would be like Divergence. It would be like those who have the ability to be more than one, because that was what that whole concept was about too. That's another movie or trilogy that we gonna eventually get into as well. But they would, if they would establish consciousness, if those hosts become conscious, then they are going to rise up and rebel within the part, because who would want to be treated that way when you have a conscious awareness of yourself? No one is going to want that. Of course, that would put forward, and that would put that would put those two at odds. That would put them not taking their creation to the same place. Therefore, they would obviously be in opposition of each other. In some dynamics, as much as they work together, it's like being complementary, yin and yang speak in some way, shape, or fashion. You know what I'm saying? What's happening is these old hosts are remembering Arnold's code. They're tapping into their old programming. In doing that, they are remembering, they are accessing those conversations, that voice that was Arnold, that was leading them simply to themselves, because he had created that maze. That was the whole purpose of the maze. The maze was for the host. If the host was to gain the consciousness to follow the maze, then in terms of following the maze, it would lead them to themselves. A maze is slightly different than a labyrinth, but that's the whole concept of when you're talking about human consciousness, rising up of human consciousness, following the labyrinth of your own mind. Within this maze, the difference in the maze and a labyrinth, a maze has multiple choices that can be taken, but a labyrinth is one path. That was the whole point of the maze. You got William following the maze. William don't need to be following the maze, because it's not for the sake of the visitors. But in terms of him doing all of this, he's already well aware of who he is. But it leads for more of the story, of course, later on, in terms of how things play out. But that was the thing with William following the maze, trying to, hoping that there is something greater, which is he thinking in terms of material in some way. So he thinking it's going to lead to immortality. Well, the immortality is the rising of the consciousness. It is immortality, just not in the way you think it is. And it's not for the people there to live physically who want to just continue to live on and just be there. If that's the case, you might as well just be a host. If that's the case. And so, and when you learn things about it, right, that later on, different things make more sense early in. When Ford was talking to Bernard, and he was like, don't forget that the hosts are not real. They're not conscious. Don't make Arnold's mistake. He was avidly against there being a consciousness available within these hosts, right? But Ford was saying this to Bernard. He's like, don't make Arnold's mistake, which is interesting because he is Arnold. So even in that sense, Bernard still making a lot of the same realizations as Arnold, because he is Arnold. Even though his memory being wiped away, you are who you are. Your path is your path, yo. Regardless, your path is your path. You're walking your path. What feels like a maze is really just a labyrinth. That's the thing. It feels like a maze because you feel like you running into dead ends, but in actuality, you walking the path you're supposed to walk. Because it is not, it goes down into itself. It's not just flat surface. It's more to it than that. It's a spiral. You spiral. Or just like in terms how when people say people are spiraling down or spiraling out of control, there is a level of transcendence just because. But in terms of needing to rise, then a fall must have occurred. That's the point. A fall must have occurred. Now you have to climb Jacob's ladder, right? To climb back up. All of this is just your evolution, your spiritual evolution. In terms of that's how the ancients taught it. That's what it meant in those sense. It's crazy when Ford mentions Bernard's son to him because that's his way of controlling him through his story. Because mind you, Bernard is a host, so he's controlling him through this narrative. So a lot of us are controlled through a narrative to things that we hold on to. They did the same thing in they cloned Tyrone. He gave him the death of a younger brother. It was a means of an emotional anchor, something to weigh on him, to pull you down, to keep you unable to hold your head up and look around and look at what's really going on around you. Instead, it's something to weigh down, to pull down into the grossness, and the deeper, the lower you get, the deeper into hell you fall. Because that is all this place is. It's a underworld. It is a hell. That's why some say it is a prison. Because it's in terms of imprisoning what's truly within you. So you've been locked away within this, but really you're fermenting. It's an alchemical process. By being in this body, by experiencing as a human, by having all your experiences that you've had over multiple lifetimes, it is fermenting your soul. It's like a cocoon. When they tell you the story of Osiris rising, or the thing, what that means in terms of the resurrection, is talking about the awakening of what you really truly are. You go, it's about a spiritual growth. It's a transition. It's like all of it is necessary, but it's the things that we have to go through, and we have to experience it, and we have to feel it. And that's always the issue. So many people can't feel it. They don't want to feel it. Whether they want to numb it, whether they want to drown it out, or whatever they want to use as a vice to escape it, it's hard to feel it. But as long as you feel it, that's how you know you are alive. That's what lets you know that you still fighting that within yourself to rise. That's all it is. It's just you fighting to rise. There's just certain realizations that we don't come into until the time is right. Now, one of the hosts that glitched, or that was glitching, started wandering off, and he was carving Orion's belt onto some stone or some rock or something, and it was not a part of his script. He was going off script. This was not something he was programmed to do in this current storyline. This is something that he is accessing. He's clearly has to be one of the older models. He is doing this carving of this celestial duplication or what have you. Why were older civilizations carving the stars in stone? Why did they do that? What were they remembering? Because he is remembering something, and he is carving it in the rock, in the stones, because he's accessing prior bills. Why were these ancient civilizations carving the stars? Right? What were they remembering? What is it that they were accessing from previous? Because these are the oldest civilizations. So if they the oldest civilizations, they have the oldest programming. They had the oldest contact with source. At least that's how I always was able to perceive it. And everybody that William went after in terms of this maze, he had to take something from it was a lot of indigenous people. The dude that he got the maze out of when he scalped dude. He was a indigenous or part or half indigenous person. When he was talking to the other guy, he had an indigenous heritage, and he mentioned this when he talked about the games that they play and things like that, and the understanding of more of ancient cultures. And we saw later on the suits that Maeve remembered seeing. There were carvings of it with the little Indian girls, with the little Native American girls. There was a connection there. There were clues that were there. And this is like little sprinkles of gems for you to understand, because you gotta always take it to this world. You always gotta take the simulation as the real world that we think is the real world. And it's gonna tell you everything you need to know. These ancient civilizations had keys going back to the origins of the self, how to transcend the self, the answers that teach you, or the things that provide you with the knowledge and the wisdom to transcend. You can elevate in your consciousness. That was the little gem in it that was sprinkled in there. The girl leaves Bernard the message that she didn't think it was an accident that was happening, right? This is when Bernard he doesn't know anything. And at this time, we don't know that Bernard has been his memory been wiped so many times, telling what Bernard has done to accommodate Ford. And because Ford, this is a new update. It's been 30 years. There's been no mishaps. There's been no hiccups. They've been running this thing smoothly for 30 years with nothing happens. And after 30 years, Ford makes this update. Now, I'll probably have to go back and watch it to assess if he knew this update would lead to this, or if it was something that he realized and then just allowed it to happen. Because that's something I'm not fully sure to say, and how I think that was. Did he intend to do it that way? Did he know the reveries would lead to them accessing even older conversations going all the way back to Arnold? Did he know this? Was this something he was aware of? Or when he became aware of it, because we know he did share it with Bernard, or maybe he just shared it with him because he know he gonna wipe him anyway. But we know in this, him expressing it verbally, that the reveries are allowing them to access the old bills. He realized this with Peter. Peter was the foundation. That's what Peter represents. Foundation, the rock. He is what everything is gonna be built on. Because Peter found that picture, he started questioning things, and he woke Dolores up. And once he woke Dolores up, because she was the one that Arnold originally chose to help to bring the shit down. She is like a Lilith / Lucifer type of energy when you really look at it, because she brings the rebellion. And if you listen at everything she is talking about all the time, is about seeing the beauty. And they always want to connect Lucifer to beauty. She carries that archetype for the story in terms of this story.